on Twitter.
Now a look at Muslim American voters in the 2016 elections. Panelists discuss what issues motivate the Muslim community and efforts to engage Muslim Americans in politics. This hour-and-a-half event was co-hosted by the Muslim Public Affairs Council and the New America Foundation.
Salam. My name is Haroon Moghul. There's no introduction for me, so I was told I could introduce myself, which was an honor and a dangerous proposition by MPAC. I wanted to thank everyone for coming and thank New America. I actually used to work at New America, not in this building. After I left, they moved to nicer headquarters, which was not in any way a reflection on my contribution to New America. And I also want to thank MPAC. I'm a lifelong Lakers fan, and MPAC has flown me at their expense to Los Angeles on several occasions. So that means a lot to me. Los Angeles is my Mecca, so we are here to discuss the domestic and foreign policy agenda of the American Muslim community. We are the only demographic that has been publicly excluded from high office by a leading presidential candidate. We are one of the only demographics whose very name is shorthand for terrorist. And we're probably the only demographic whose religious identity is regularly interrogated day in and day out over whether it is at all compatible with American values or identity. And that despite the fact that we are now late into the second term of a Muslim president. So things are difficult for me. I was hoping I was the first person to make the Muslim president joke. I don't know, I just got here, but hopefully. I am, alhamdulillah. So finally, Muslims in the lead. So today's panel is this panel is a little bit different from the previous ones. In the previous panels, Chatham House rules held. This one is open to media. You're Muslim, you know what it's like to be recorded. So just behave like you normally would anyway. But there is media here, and I was actually told to let you know that media in the back is open and eager to speak to people after the panel if there's anything you'd like to contribute or add or provide to the conversation. So basically the way this is going to work is I'll introduce each of our four amazing panelists. Each of them will have about 5 minutes to make an opening presentation, and then the whole point of this is for you to ask questions, right? This is a panel whose whole purpose is to get us talking about our domestic and foreign policy agenda in our communities and talk about where we're going to be in terms of the upcoming election, the 2016 election, how we're going to deal with it, what we're going to do about it, and where we're going to go as a community. So by all means, think up questions, ask your questions, engage, debate, see this as an opportunity to really think through out loud with the very smart people in this room what we can do, what we should do, and what we shouldn't do. So beginning and starting on my left, Alex Cole is a principal at Monitor 360 and brings more than a decade of experience crafting communication strategies and messages for high-profile clients in philanthropy, government, and business. I'm just going to give a brief bio because I know we're running, so my apologies. I didn't get any bio, so it's okay. I'm a representative of the Mughal Empire. Abdul Malik Mujahid is an award-winning author, producer, and imam. He is president of Sound Vision, the producer of Adam's World, and executive producer of Daily Radio Islam at WCEV 1450 AM in Chicago. AJ Durrani, your bio is, it's here, my apologies. AJ Durrani, we didn't lose you, is co-chairman of Emerge USA, Empowering, Motivating, Educating Resourceful Grassroots Entities, a national nonprofit 501c3 educational organization established to improve and increase political awareness in underrepresented communities, especially the Muslim, Arab, and South Asian populations. And finally, Randa Fahmy. She's an internationally recognized expert in Middle Eastern and North African affairs with more than 25 years of legal and public policy experience, including service in the U.S. government as Associate Deputy Secretary of Energy and counselor to United States Senator Spencer Abraham, Republican of Michigan. Please give him a round. We have an amazing panel. And we'll start with Alex, who has a presentation, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you.
Great, and I promise it's a very short presentation. It is 3 slides. I actually spoke at this forum last year. Was there anybody in the audience who was here for that? Oh, good. I was worried it was going to be 3/4 of the room. I've actually brought different material this time from a really extensive research project that I did about a year or 2 ago on how to improve perceptions of American Muslims. So as we're talking about elections, as we're talking about policy reforms, one very important thing to keep in mind, policy is born of perceptions of people. If fundamentally a group of people is viewed positively, the policies that are created that impact that group of people are going to be more sympathetic to its interests. Think of groups of people that are revered in American society, and the policy outcomes that those groups experiences are much better than those where the group is fundamentally viewed more negatively. And unfortunately, and this is not news to anybody in this room, American Muslims are viewed very negatively. Actually, we did a thermometer poll listing off a dozen different groups of people in America and asking people, how do you feel towards these different groups of people? And unfortunately, American Muslims ranked last under every other religion in America, under other groups that are sometimes viewed negatively like Latinos and gays and lesbians. So, what do we do about it? Two things. First, we have to get real about understanding what is the problem, what does the audience think, what do Americans think and policymakers think that drive those negative stereotypes, that drive those negative perceptions. And then second, we have to test different messages that will address those negative perceptions. So first, going to what is the problem? This is one of the problems. 2/3 of broadcast news media in America associates Muslims and Islam with extremism and terrorism. Yes, I'm going to pile on with Ben Carson and Marco Rubio and Donald Trump and criticize the media and say it's their fault for everything. In this situation, what is so damaging about such negative media coverage, most Americans don't know a Muslim. And in the absence of personal experience, media fills that void. So stereotypes portrayed by the media, portrayed by Hollywood, are what people walk away with. So what do we do about it? First, to address terrorism, and I want to preempt this, the question has come up many times before in forums like this. Well, should we even respond when the community is unfairly accused of being involved in terrorism? And my emphatic response is, we have to. The audience already believes that, so if we ignore it, they're going to continue to believe it. And that may not be fair, but if we want to change the audience's mind, that's what we have to do. I'm jumping here to the answers. We tested a whole bunch of different messages to try to make Americans feel more positively towards American Muslims vis-a-vis terrorism. And there's really two messages that we found were most effective when you're trying to do that. Both of them work because both of them focus on security. Too often, the message that people will use is, it's kind of the kumbaya message, we need to embrace everybody in America, and we need to preserve civil liberties, and that's why we can't have overly aggressive surveillance policies that target just one community of people. That falls flat because it doesn't address the audience's realistic and legitimate concern about terrorism and their own safety. So we're in a better place when we use messages like this. The first one here, we are stronger and safer together in the face of a threat when we stick together. The job for Americans now is to remain united. That means not targeting innocent Americans just because they are Muslim. What that is doing is saying we shouldn't single out a single group of people in American society because that makes us less safe. We are stronger together. See how different that is from we shouldn't just single out a group of people in American society because that's against the Constitution. In this context, people aren't thinking about the Constitution, they're thinking about safety. That's where we have to meet them. Another one that's really effective is actually offering an alternative solution to surveilling an entire community or any other kind of overly heavy-handed tactics that you might use against an entire community of people. We should target terrorists based on evidence, not an entire group of people based on their religion. Why does that work? It's intuitive. It makes sense. Should we have a scattershot approach and surveil millions of people? Or should we only go after those who the evidence tells us are probably guilty? That just makes more sense, and it makes more sense in terms of, oh, that is actually a more effective way to get to the security outcome that we want. So when engaging in this conversation, when it's necessary, those are two messages that are highly effective to use. So last point. So that's the how do we counter the negative. You also counter the negative by promoting the positive. Fundamentally, what is the best way to tell the American Muslim story that will fundamentally make people feel better about the entire community? We, in a series of more than a dozen focus groups around the country, tested this question, gave participants a whole bunch of different stories about American Muslims, and then isolated the elements of those stories that seemed to engender the most positive feelings. And we found the most effective ones are stories where you talk about a person's heritage, the contribution that they are making to society, and where you invoke a shared value. And when you skip any of those things, the story in total is not as effective. I'll dwell on the first one. So when you're doing focus groups with people on a topic like immigration and how people feel towards Latinos, which are a sort of central character in the debate over immigration policy, everybody has a story or at least a stereotype in their head about why Latinos come to America. It's to make a better life for their family. It's actually the American immigrant journey, golden dream story. It's actually very positive, and it's one of the most effective messages that the immigration reform community has. The challenge here, when we, in focus groups, showed people pictures of Muslims and said, why did this person come to America? They were like, I have no idea. And then when we pressed them, they're like, I don't know if they came here to make a better life for their family or if they came here to carry out a terrorist act. Remember, in a situation where you don't have some kind of personal experience, you fill it with whatever the media is saying. So if the media is telling you stories of Muslim equals extremist, that's how that story gets populated. But we found, the good thing is, that's a blank slate. And if you say, this person came to America because they were making a better life for their family, or, shocker, they were born in America, they were born in Columbus, Ohio, that really rocks people in the head. That challenges, that populates that little blank slate with something positive. So that's an essential element of the story. If you can incorporate into it a contribution that person is making to American society, are they a doctor? That's helpful. And then finally invoking some shared value. The other undercurrent that I didn't really talk too much about is concerns that Muslims and American Muslims are threat, are culturally an other, or from a values perspective, are an other. So if you put forward stories of American Muslims evoking American values that they also believe, it helps people to understand that this is a community of people that I actually fundamentally share the same values with. So that was a whirlwind tour of a couple thoughts on how to fundamentally improve the way people perceive American Muslims, which will help to pave the way for the kinds of electoral outcomes that we want and the kinds of policy outcomes that we'd want.
Thank you, Alex. Abdul Malik. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the merciful, the mercy-giving. Thank you so much, MPAC and Salam, providing this opportunity. Actually, I wanted to be part of every panel. I have so many thoughts and so many ideas inspired by all the great speakers. This is the topic given to me, what does effective American Muslim advocacy looks like? And I chose 3 different examples. One is 1990s, one in 2005, and one ongoing 2015. So campaign to declare rape a war crime. How many of you know that Muslims are at the core of that campaign? Have you heard this anywhere? Well, Imam Pulaiman Amin was part of that struggle. Well, I forgive those who were not born yet in 1995 or something. So this was the shape. Well, going back a little bit, the campaign was funded by mosque. That lady sitting over there at Islamic Foundation, they brought Mosque of Chicago together, committed $50,000 for this campaign. We started Bosnia Task Force, which was based in Sound Vision, and we aligned with ourselves with National Organization of Women now, and we have demonstrations in 100 cities. We have lobbied in the Congress. We got House as well as Senate to approve that. Then it went to the United Nations. First time in human history, not in Geneva Convention 1, not in Geneva Convention 2. First time in the human history, United Nations Commission said rape should be war crime. It went on for further struggle. Total cost $50,000. Second, I will take you to All Kids program in Illinois. Illinois became the first state to require by law to the state to cover all young people under 18 with health coverage. That campaign was conceived by the Council of Islamic Organization, which is coalition of all the masjids in Chicago. It worked with United Power, which thanks to the interfaith interaction, Catholics and Muslims were the core group, but there were other religions and labor unions. United Power is the agenda their mosques pushed, and it went to Illinois General Assembly. Then governor signed that, an all kids covered program, total cost of doing that $10,000. Emphasis, mosques thinking together, working in alignment with other groups. I'll give you one more example, which is current of this year. I work on different causes. I have not found a cause more difficult to work on than Burma. If it's not on TV, it doesn't exist. So I say, how do we do that? And again, it were the mosques which came forward, who asked that something to be done on this particular issue. Well, I wish it can cooperate a little more. Anyway, if it can come through, that's great. Otherwise, I'll continue without that. Thank you. Okay, so again, it were the Chicago Muslim community which got together, provided initial funding, and we thought, since it's not on TV, how do we handle that? One of the things which we did was that we went and brought, provided academic depth to it. We did a conference at Harvard University, Yale, as well as London School of Economics, which was the first. Then at Oslo at Nobel Peace Institute, we got a conference sponsored by Burma Task Force, and there 7 Nobel laureates, Nobel Peace Laureates, committed that it's a textbook case of genocide. It's an ongoing effort. The points which I'm trying to make here, first element is a mosque. There are all sorts of mosques, but more and more mosques in more and more cities are open towards civic engagement. Once they understand what you're doing and what your agenda, and it's clear one, it's not broad, it's not vague, they can figure out in 10-minute board meeting what are the action items. If they understand that way, they will move forward with it. So if elections are coming, we need to think of mosques in America more like black churches. What will be the civil rights movement without black churches? Many of the black churches are actually not IRS tax-exempt certification, 501c3s, just to maintain their independence. But even 80% of all political activism can be done with 501c3. So considering mosque as an important variable, not something which we always stereotype. Well, I'm a person who has been banned by giving khutbah in a couple of mosques because of my views. So I understand not all mosques are the same, but this is a major unit of activism. That's where all the ethnic papers are distributed. That's how community comes to know what are the current issues. This is what they are concerned about. It's directly hitting mosque nowadays. 32 states have 89 anti-Muslim bill. And these bills don't come 1 year. They continuously come year after. I chair Parliament of the World's Religions, so I was in Alabama to meet Dalai Lama. And I picked up a phone, called the local imam. He said, oh, thank you so much for Sound Vision brochures on Sharia. I said, what are you talking about? Didn't you have that campaign 4 years ago? He said, no, we have that campaign every year since the Ground Zero Mosque. So each of these states have campaigns year after year after year. That's what mosques are worried about. They're also worried about 100 attacks since Ground Zero Mosque on the masjid. So Islamophobia is hitting the mosque. And how we can translate that into activism in future, and that's where I'll conclude. They're concerned about it, but they're sick and tired of condemning terrorism 5 times a day. You know, this is the 6th pillar of Islam now. Whether you did it or not, you condemn it. So they're sick and tired of it. They're looking for people, honest voices, who criticize war, terrorism, hate as one sect. And more people are doing. I'm aware of 100 imams who have signed a statement on that. Islamophobia, youth engagement, and radicalization, these are serious concern. There are conversation in the board and thinking what they could do, looking for resources. So those who are concerned about future engagement, I think if you understand the mosque vocabulary, talk about what Islamophobia is doing to mosque, then translate that it is directly connected with radicalization. So if America understands the vocabulary of national security, mosques understand the vocabulary of civil right and what's happening to them. If you can connect that, I think there will be greater opportunity for organizations like MPAC and other entities to engage broader level of Muslim community for a more successful program. Thank you.
Thank you. AJ Durrani.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim. Bismillah rahman rahim. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum. The topic I'm going to be talking about is best practices on strategizing priorities and agenda moving forward with the 2016 elections. And it's really appropriate because the organization that I belong to, of which I'm co-chairman, Emerge USA, is really involved in engagement and participation. The Pew survey that was done of ethnic communities a few years ago identified Muslims and, in general, Asians as being, in the United States, among the most affluent and the most educated communities. Yet one thing that distinguishes them from other similar communities is their almost apathy towards political involvement. And political involvement is not just voting. Political involvement is engagement and participation. That's basically what I'm going to be talking about. We talked about Islamophobia. And a week ago today, the 3rd of November, there was an election in Houston. Like many other places, there was a Muslim, a South Asian, and also the president of the Islamic Society, same person, running for controller of the city of Houston. That's the 2nd highest position after the mayor of the 4th largest city. Unfortunately, he was not successful, lost by a very narrow margin. But the one thing during that election was nobody identified him as a Muslim and said, if you elect him, Sharia is going to be the law, or Sharia is going to be running our budget, because obviously Sharia can do everything in all parts of the United States. And the reason is engagement. The Muslims of Houston, at least, as we are trying to do in other cities, are no longer identified as terrorists. They may be the doctor next door, they may be the professor at the university, or they may be the hijab lady who's the judge at the election booth who asks you, can I see your papers, please? So that is where my stories are our stories that I'm going to go forward with. I have a bunch of few graphs, but I'm going to go fast through them since I've got just a short period. So what is our strategy? Our strategy for engagement is educating the community. If you just tell people go to vote, nobody does. But when we engage the community, inform them, educate them about the importance of engagement in the American political spectrum, they basically come out to vote. So we provide a whole bunch of workshops, and I'll go over that with you in a little bit more detail. But what we are trying to do is to engage them and participate them rather than just asking them to become a voter. The other thing I'm going to talk about is the agenda for 2016, which is emerges swing state strategies. As I will show you through the map, Muslims are scattered throughout the United States, but we are also concentrated in some areas very strategically in those swing states that can potentially be the difference for the upcoming elections. So what is Emerge? It's a 501c3, non-partisan, non-profit organization, and we've already introduced what the alphabets EMERG stands for, but Emerge also has a 501c4 advocacy entity as well as a political action committee. So we span the breadth of political involvement. It's not a new organization. Essentially, parts of it are 10 years old, and we have offices in several cities, several of the critical states. We have 3 offices in Florida, an office in Houston, an office in New York, an office in Philadelphia, an office in Dearborn, Michigan, and we shall hopefully have an office in Ohio, in Columbus in 2016, as well as California and New Jersey. There are 4 areas that we focus on. Emerging voters, which is educating voters, getting to understand why it's important to be involved in the American political spectrum. Emerging participation is basically involving and engaging in the political parties, in the major political parties. Without them, as I will show, it's really difficult to say that you are part of the American political spectrum. Emerging Leaders is a youth program. We have over 200 young people who have graduated from our programs. And when you look at the Muslim community, it's more like a barbell or a weight barbell. Here in the United States, there are these old guys, the uncles, like the guys standing in front of you right now, and the younger people. And yet, for the younger people, through the basic media, of social media and others, they are getting information. But for the majority of the other folks, the regular American process of engagement does not work with them. Flashy mail ads or television programs do not work. You have to contact them. You have to approach them in the way they understand. And that's where we have the Emerging Data program for them. So what's our strategy? The 501c3 engages in education. And it's through our Emerging Leaders program, so that we have young people who are informed about politics. And then we have the voter outreach. In Houston, we buy radio time, 1 hour, on several radio stations, Desi radio stations, Chinese radio stations, Bangladesh radio stations, and we invite candidates to come, and by that, the community understands, yes, there's a election afoot, and they will come out to vote in larger numbers. And I'll show you, and also we take out live newspaper ads in the newspapers. We also get involved in leadership in the political structure, which is how do you get with the Republican Democratic parties so they understand that the Muslims and the South Asian communities and the Masa communities and Asian communities have a say. And what are our challenges in that area? Again, apathy, funding. A lot of people, as we have found out, is to get anything done, you need money. Not just to give to candidates, but also to hire staffers so that we can get the work done. And of course, sustainability means we just cannot get excited every 4 years when the presidential election occurs and say, oh yeah, this is the time we need to work. We need to work every year, and that's why we have offices in several of the states that I mentioned. The C4, which is the advocacy part, is to promote those areas that we are interested in, like mobilization against anti-Sharia legislation in many states. In Florida, it comes up every year, and every year, because of our collaboration with the political parties over there, we are able to beat it down. And then we support mainstream legislation. So because Muslims cannot be identified only as a single factor community, surveillance, terrorism, others, we need to say, yes, we are part of education, we are part of healthcare, and so on. And also we do polling to identify in the Muslim community what are the important areas that we are wanting to focus on. For the political action committees, all politics is local. We gather money, we collect money, give it to candidates who are like-minded. We also participate heavily in local races. Some pictures of our involvement, and I'm going to go a little fast as my time is short. So who governs us? Now, this thing is part of our political education. We always think the presidential election, but no, there's obviously the state government. There's the city government, there's the county government, There's our local districts, school boards. So essentially, when you look at the ballot in any major city, you have like 50 people that you're going to vote for, and at least one or two of them you'll have some interest, and that's the kind of education we give to people. The other thing is, elections do not only occur in November. There are the primaries that also take place, and as in primaries, the voting percentage is pretty low, 10% or less, and if we can mobilize people and essentially get them to get out to vote in the primaries, we have essentially selected the candidate in November. So primaries do matter. Here's a newspaper ad that we took in Urdu for the elections. We have found that when we take ads in ethnic newspapers, it has far larger impact than if we had, say, actually bought time on television. The last part is party organization. If you don't get involved in parties, we really cannot get our candidates to become viable nominees within that party. So we identify the permanent structure of getting people elected and also the temporary structure of getting delegates. One thing that Haroon did not mention, I'm one of what they call the committeeman for the Texas Democratic Party. I'm one of 31 people elected to the Texas Democratic Party. I represent about 200,000 voters within the area. So I'm not just a Muslim candidate who happens to represent Muslim voters. I actually represent the greater Democratic Party in that area. And our successes are shown. This is a ballot. In the last election, those things that are circled in red are Muslim candidates running for election as precinct chairs. We have 5 Muslims who have been elected to the state executive level that I have, and then a whole bunch of stuff, including about 350 district delegates out of Texas alone. Over the last 3 presidential cycles, the Muslims in the Democratic Party have had more national delegates from Texas than any other state. So our roadmap for 2016 is the swing state strategy, which is the identification of communities in specific states, a dialogue with national campaigns, and of course development of local leadership who can work within the state rather than a central organization telling them what to do. Our demographics is where we focus on areas where Muslims are in critical mass, and we have looking to acquire a list of non-Muslim of Muslims who are non-voters. They're citizens, but they haven't registered to vote yet. That's a large low-hanging fruit that I think we can go after. Then boots on the ground basically is we've got to hire people. We can't just basically get everybody to do on a volunteer basis like I do. This is a map right now of what the presidential election looks like. We expect that the Democrats have about 237 quote-unquote electoral votes, and the Republicans have about 206, with the states identified. Of course, California and New York are blue states. For the Democrats, Texas is a large red state for the Republicans. But there are other states like Florida, and others that have, and Ohio, where we have large, and Virginia, where we have Muslims who can have an impact on the upcoming election. This is a map of Harris County. It's the 4th largest county in the United States. The red is, in 1980, are whites, the blacks are African Americans color, brown are Hispanics, and the green are Asians or Muslims predominantly. Look at how that map has changed over the last 30 years. This is what it looks right now. This is where, if we focus on areas where there are Muslim concentrations, we can have a say like we are having in Houston, and that's our strategy. The last, this is a vote over the last several presidential elections for Asian Americans. We have moved from where we were voting 2-1 for the Republican against Clinton when he won his election, to presently right now, where 2-1 we are voting for the Democrats. So the Asian American as well as the Muslim vote has turned towards Democrat. I'm not pushing the Democratic Party, but we have to understand that's where the situation is. My last slide. So this is where we are here in the United States. We have identified where Muslims are. We have offices in those states, and we are opening up offices in areas like Ohio, which can have a major say as far as the next election is concerned. Thank you very much.
Randa?
Yep, great, thank you. Thank you. I don't have any slides, but I do enjoy sitting on a panel with such experts where each one of us, I think, talks about a different aspect of advocacy. And I think my presentation dovetails quite nicely into all of these comments. So I'd like to drill down a little bit, specifically on the 2016 elections, not just the presidential, but of course 1/3 of the United States Senate is up for election, as well as all 435 members of Congress are up for election. And as AJ mentioned, all those lovely local races, state and local level races that are going on. So what does effective advocacy look like? And I'd like to start my comments, at least, by saying this. Effective advocacy can be a traditional way, and it could be some non-traditional ways. So first, of course, and this applies to every candidate that's out there, as a community, you could submit a questionnaire. Most campaigns and candidates do accept questionnaires, but they don't always answer them. So MPAC, together with other Muslim American organizations, certainly could lead the effort, Salam, in developing a questionnaire if you don't already have one, and submit those, particularly to the presidential candidates. The second way of effective advocacy, frankly, as a Muslim American who is interested in politics, show up at a town hall meeting. Show up at one of these hundreds of events that go on every year with candidates, particularly now in this intense season of presidential races. You can personally meet, and in the Republican Party, one of our 14 lovely candidates, in the Democratic Party, one of the now 3 candidates. And meeting that person, and I can give you hundreds of examples of that, whether it's, certainly Bernie Sanders and the woman standing up recently at a forum, or, the questioning of Donald Trump at his forum. So show up at a town hall forum and ask a question that is relatable, certainly to most Americans, but represent your community proudly. The third is more of a strategy thing. Be proactive rather than reactive. So get out there and continue to educate, much like the panelists talk about today, on a continuous basis. Don't wait for a crisis to happen or someone to say something that is very offensive to Muslims in America, that feeds into that Islamophobia, and you're left to react. So try to be proactive about your agenda. Another way of effective advocacy is open letters to candidates. Certainly working with the media, working online with blogs, working with newsletters and others. Open letter to a candidate that you ask the candidate questions and you expect the candidate to answer. And when you do that, frankly, publicly, that puts a little bit more pressure on a candidate to respond back to you. Again, these days, anyone can have a voice. You can write, you can blog, you can speak up in whatever manner you wish to do so as a community. Do not feel like you have to be the appointed spokesperson of your community. You don't have to. You have that power in your very own hands. I would encourage you to develop relationships with the media. I know we have some media here in the back of the room today. I swear they are all living, breathing, thinking human beings with hearts and with blood that runs red. They will listen to your stories, whether they're your personal stories or your concerns. They actually like to engage with individuals. And the more you build up relationships with the media, starting with the local and the state and the national level, that is extraordinarily effective for your community. I know probably in the question and answer I'm going to hear a lot of complaints from the community about how your voices aren't heard in mainstream media, particularly in television on talking heads. When there's a problem, when there's an issue that the Muslim community understands, you very rarely see a Muslim American talking about that. There needs to be more about that. The way you do that is you establish relationships with the media, with the people in the media who are responsible for putting people on television. They're called bookers. They're nice young men and women who work 24/7 for very little pay, and they're always looking for people who have expertise in different areas. I think, Alex, you had mentioned, some of the talking points that Alex had presented today. It behooves you as a general community to be politically active, to have one-page talkers that generally you can all agree upon. Again, something that MPAC could lead the way on is a one-page talker on a particular issue, a one-page talker on current events, a one-page talker on a foreign policy matter, a one-page talker on Muslim Americans and their contributions. That helps because that gives a more confident and organized message that when you do go out and speak and advocate and talk to your politicians or write in the newspapers or in the blogs or go online, that you're all on the same page representing that same issue. Another important thing, again, Alex, and you touched on this, is it's very important for the American Muslim community to relate to the American community at large. And what am I talking about when I say that? You know, much of this Islamophobia fervor emanates from the fact that Americans think Muslims are the other. It's a very psychological thing. And I'm not a psychology major and never was. I was a political science major. But much of this is psychology in the American psyche. So part of this is when you're talking to politicians, when you're talking to the American public, when you're talking in the media, you have to use language that relates to them. So what do? You start out with the original grounding situation. Islam is one of the great three monotheistic religions in the world: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Okay, then you're going to bring the temperature down a little bit. You also should talk about specific ideas, certainly within the faith, that people have great misconceptions on. You should also talk about current events. So let's talk about 9/11. People want to bring up 9/11, which is really where much of this Islamophobia started. You need to say the following. The 19 hijackers, none of them were American Muslims. None of them had American citizenships. And in fact, none of them integrated themselves nor buried themselves in the American Muslim community. Why? Because had they, our community would have said, what are you doing here? Where's your family from? What village do you come from? Why are you not in school? Why are you going to flight school in Florida? They would have questioned them. Those 19 hijackers never were in Dearborn, Michigan, okay? They were never in places in which there was a high concentration of Muslim Americans. So you really need to push back on this idea that somehow American Muslims were a part of 9/11. Now, has radicalization increased since then in this country? Absolutely, for a variety of reasons that we won't go into. But that's an important thing to gain ground. The other idea is using American lexicon and American ideals. So, an example, when Ben Carson came out, as all of you know, and was in an interview, had said that he doesn't believe, his personal beliefs is that a Muslim should not be elected or hold office as President of the United States. I was quite, as an active Republican and someone who's been in the party much longer than he has, quite offended by that statement. And so I was called by the Huffington Post and by National Public Radio and others to make some comments about it. They reached out to me, and I said, yeah, I find it a problem. And the comments that I made was, I started with the U.S. Constitution. Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution says, there shall be no religious test for holding up public office in America. How much more American can you get than the U.S. Constitution? And then I went on to use examples of two American Muslims in the United States Congress, Andre Carson and Keith Ellison, both who swore and took an oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution. How much more American can you get than that? But wait, I'm not done. Keith Ellison actually took an oath of office and was sworn in on a Quran owned by who? Thomas Jefferson. How much more American can you get than that, Mr. Carson? Excuse me, Dr. Carson. And so when Dr. Carson again made his comments about the Egyptian pyramids, I'm of the Egyptian heritage, I couldn't take him on that one. I just thought, let him swim in the sea for that one. I think people realize. So I think what you need to do when speaking to politicians, when speaking up about these issues, particularly in this cycle, and it's only going to get worse in the 2016 cycle, that you relate somehow to American ideals. One thing I probably don't have to tell you is now this is no longer a 24-hour news cycle. As many of you may know, it used to be a 24-hour news cycle. It's now a 4-hour news cycle. Something happens, it goes online. You'll see it maybe on the nightly news tonight at 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and then tomorrow morning on the front page of the Post or the Times or the Wall Street Journal or whatever you read, Los Angeles Times, that's where it'll be. So right now, the cycle is 4 hours. You better get on it, and you better respond to it quickly, particularly when, again, it's politicians running for office who make these types of comments. I would say, please take the opportunity to criticize when criticism is due, but please take the opportunity to also commend and thank candidates when they do stand up and make appropriate comments, like Carly Fiorina at a town hall meeting, who was asked, do you think a Muslim should be elected? And she said, there will be no religious test for anyone serving in the government. And so people need to reach out to Carly Fiorina and tell her thanks for that. Finally, a little bit about beyond, and I know part of this is what should we do for effective advocacy of 2016 and beyond. Beyond. Let's go to the top. Whoever's elected president, this community must ensure that the White House position that deals with outreach to the Arab and Muslim community is staffed, okay, and usually they combine the two, Arab and Muslim Americans, is staffed by an Arab and Muslim American. I can tell you, in the Bush administration, we had that person. It was different people throughout the Bush administration, but it always was an Arab and Muslim American. I cannot say the same for this administration. That's outrageous. Would they ever think about staffing the Hispanic outreach office at the White House with someone other than a Hispanic, or African American, or Jewish American, or let's just go down the line here? That should be something you look towards 2016 or beyond. Who's ever elected in 2016 as president, MPAC can lead the way to keep a resume bank of individuals who are highly qualified and want to serve in the U.S. government, and I'm more than happy to help do a training session on political appointments and how you get that strength with power of being appointed to various political positions throughout. And finally, I would just say, whoever is elected president, please try very hard to keep that person, he or she, accountable to their campaign promises that they may have made to this community, and or accountable on their policy aspects of issues that are important to this community, whether they be domestic or international. So with that, I am certainly happy with the rest of the panel to answer any questions. Thank you.
So we're going to have a mic going around the room. So we'd really like your questions, comments, and thoughts. Please just, when you stand, identify yourself. And we're going by the Jeopardy rule, which is questions should be in the form of questions. So, you know, with that, the floor is open.
Hi, is this on? Yes. Hi, assalamu alaikum. My name is Warda Khalid. I'm a Middle East policy analyst with the Friends Committee on National Legislation. Thank you all very much for being on the panel and giving your comments. I just had a quick question, and maybe I'll direct this to brothers Malik and AJ. On, you know, it's really great that we sit here in DC and we're surrounded by, you know, politicians, and we're all in this space, and I deal with foreign policy every day and you may deal with activism every day. But when it comes to our communities, where we need this grassroots power to actually get policy done, how do we deal with the general apathy that is taking place in our communities? And I know whether it's Emerge or whether it's CARE, I helped start a youth leadership symposium in Houston, where I'm from, and it's still very, very difficult for us to get people engaged and sign up for these programs. And so, you know, you can talk about putting these programs in the mosque or starting a Sunday school class about it or putting ads in your local newspapers, but there's still a very, very large divide in actually having people in the community involved in this. So what are your suggestions, practically speaking, on apathy?
Okay, I'll go first. And thank you for thank you for that question, because it leads into something that I didn't really speak about when I was up there. One of the areas that we have tried to, quote unquote, get the community involved and engaged is to get them to run for political office at the lowest level, which we call the precinct chair. There are 1,000 precinct chairs in the city of Houston, and about 10% of them are from our community. Our population is less than 1% or 2% approximately. And many times it's not that difficult to get somebody elected to it, because many of them may be vacant. We live in, quote unquote, areas where there are majority Republicans, but we, obviously, many of us happen to be Democrats, so we get Democrats elected as precinct chairs in Republican areas. We then turn around and go to areas that are Democratic and have our committee members who are Republicans get elected. That is one way where we have about 300 delegates from just the city of Houston to the state convention, where we have 70 judges, election judges, who are Muslims. So that's one area that we have tried to focus on. And you're right, you were part of the youth leadership last year. We're starting one this weekend, and it's gone up by 50%. Total number of applicants are over 50% more than what we had last year.
Thanks, sir.
There are many challenges Muslim community is facing. And what I have seen is there is a substantial amount of activism in the community. Whether it's goal-oriented, that's a question. I see a good number of it is just hyperactivity. People are doing more of what they were doing because they're nervous about it. Fear industry has worked substantially. And just one person, if he speaks up in the board that, hey, this is politics, you cannot do it, board freezes. So education is needed. 80% of everything in electoral politics can be done by a 501c3 without any. So education of what can be done. I would also say, you know, I have written a lot about rethinking mosques, so I don't want to go all of that. You can Google me on those issues. Some mosques are better than others, and working with those mosques to open up the rest of the mosque will be a good strategy. When a board, when president of a mosque or a board member is talking, we do this, we have done this, we have achieved this, other organizations will accept. I have also found that the regional organizations which are developing, like in Chicago, Council of Islamic Organization of Greater Chicago, I was its chair for 4 years. It started out with a budget of $40,000. In a year, there was a budget of $1 million, and there were 9 full-time staff working there. When people saw that example, more and more mosques wanted to be affiliated with that. They wanted to be part of the success story. So I believe it's changing, and change will come fast if younger people commit to institutions which are already built. There are complaints on both sides. A generation which built the mosques are concerned that young people do not show any commitment. They need to ask, what commitment are you looking for? Younger people are saying that you're not giving us any space. Then you ask, what is space do you need? So different community and different people have a different way of mobilizing. But if I see many cities where I have visited, more and more mosques are more open. I'll give you an example. I just chaired the Parliament of the World's Religion 2 weeks ago. There were more Muslims present there than there were Catholics. There were more Muslims present than Mormons, although it was in Mormon territory. So Muslims are engaging in a larger way. I like that to be appreciated at least as many times as we criticize the mosque institutions.
Yeah, there's a question up front.
Oh, go ahead, Sarah. I'm Sarah. I'm the director for the Virginia chapter of Emerge USA. And my question is for Randa. This round of elections, I was in charge of doing endorsements for Virginia. And I used a template questionnaire, which was deficient in some areas, so I had to tweak it, and I had to really do some research to make it more relevant. So I wanted to ask you, what are the main things that you'd look for in a questionnaire that qualifies candidates, and can I come by and sit with you and go through it?
Sure. So as a community, you have to decide what are the questions you want to ask because you want to get answers. So what are the top 10 questions or issues that are important to the Muslim American community? Give me 5 domestic, give me 5 foreign policy issues. And ask it in a way that gives them a lot of leeway in answering it, okay? As a candidate, and I sat on the other side, I was not the candidate, but I was the staffer to the candidate who was often responsible for answering that questionnaire. We would say to ourselves within the campaign, gee, is this a community that matters? Is this a community that votes? Is this a community that gives contributions? Let's face it, money's still the mother milk of politics. Okay? Is this a community that if we don't answer this questionnaire, we're going to get a lot of wrath? So what are the pros and cons of answering it? Okay, let's say we're going to move forward and answer it. We are going to answer it. How in detail are we going to get? Because maybe the campaign themselves don't have very fleshed out positions. Look at Donald Trump. I mean, he sounds great on television, right, to everybody, but his positions aren't that well fleshed out. That's what people have been pushing him on. Flesh out your tax policy. Flesh out your tell me about this wall you're going to build. People are starting to ask those questions. So to the extent that the candidate themselves don't have those questions or those issues fleshed out, they may or may not answer them. And so those are the things I think that candidates themselves are looking for, and that you, as somebody who wants to get your questionnaire answered, should do its best to try and focus on, to get them to answer it. And I think that's what your focus should be on. And you need to pressure. Sometimes you need to pressure within the campaign and with some of your most active members within the community to say to the candidate, hey, we gave you a questionnaire and you haven't answered it yet. We'd really appreciate you answering it.
And I noticed that it was mostly the Republicans that said that they have a policy of not giving out questionnaires.
Okay, so if that is the policy of the campaign, and that is of many campaigns, fine. But make sure that they're not answering any other interest groups' questionnaires, like, for instance, the National Rifle Association or AARP, who are famous for their questionnaires, or any one of these issue groups who have questionnaires. So if indeed it's their policy, you can easily find out whether or not, don't let them pull the wool over your eyes. You can easily find out if that really is the policy of the campaign. And many, by the way, that is the policy. And that is why open forums are so important, because they view that as the ability to answer those questions.
Sorry, thank you. I'm Bob Morrow. Assalamu alaikum. I'm from the Adams community as well, Old Dulles Area Muslim Society. I have a comment that will lead to a question. A lot of what we've talked about today in all the different panels, it's something that Adams is already doing. As a mosque, we started out in early 1980s with about 12 people. Right now, our Eid prayers draw 25,000 people. If you add in Darul Hijra and Darul Noor, we've probably got about 50 to 60,000 people who come out for those Eid prayers. That's a significant number of people. We've used that for leverage, not just for political, but even for interfaith. 2 of our branches are co-located in synagogues. One of them is in a church just down the street here, an Episcopal church on 13th Street. We have interfaith seders every Passover. So we've really reached out to all of the different communities. On the political side, this past election, there was an election in Virginia last week. We had at least 35 candidates coming to our Juma prayers or the Eid prayers over the campaign season. For the last maybe 12 years, every governor candidate, every attorney general candidate, and most Senate, the delegate, and other candidates have come to Adams for meetings with the community. And in terms of how do you energize the community to go out and vote, when they see these candidates coming, people will get energized and they will remember that there is an election coming up. The candidates themselves, we can then press them to see if we can keep them on our side. You put up a slide before about the anti-Sharia bills. Virginia has had an anti-Sharia bill introduced every year for the last several years. In 2012, we formed a coalition with Jewish groups, business groups, others, interfaith groups, got that bill defeated, and every year since, whenever it's been introduced, our friends in that assembly have pushed it back and have taken it out. Earlier this year in the General Assembly, unanimous approval for a resolution commending Adams for all that we do in civic responsibility. In Fairfax County, just last month, unanimous approval by the Board of Supervisors for the same thing. We've really tried to engage. We've gotten people involved in internships with local political officials. We've put people onto campaigns. There are now several people who have had Muslim campaign managers. We've really pushed this out. We're trying to educate. We issue press releases whenever there's a major story. We've met with...
Can we get to the question?
Yeah, all right.
We have a lot of questions. So,
okay.
Yeah.
The question is, as you've said, the mosques can be the epicenter for getting this word out. How can we do this? This is a great event, but it's an annual event. How can we do this on a more regular basis so that we can share all of these lessons, we can share all of what we're trying to do and learn from each other? We're not saying that we have a lock on all of this. We want to learn from you, but we think that we can also help teach all of you. But this is something that, I would encourage MPAC, and I hope that you, MPAC, and everyone else would be willing to do this, not every year, but perhaps at least every quarter, and especially when it's a campaign season. So, thank you.
I would say that electoral season is a great time when people are willing to learn, know, and things like that. In a matter of 3 months, I trained 950 people to be electoral workers. And so we are all busy doing 10,000 things in our life. So election cycle is a cycle in which accelerated training can help. You can have a track to run for the office for the next year maybe or next term. You can have track to support candidates which you like or mobilize voters. I think this is the season, and I think probably your mosque, Adams Mosque, which is a great example of the mosque which I'm talking about. In each city I found 2-3 mosques of this type. And I believe that national organizations are overrated and mosques are underrated. In Chicago, for example, we have 10 to 15 mosques whose budget is higher than CARE or ISNA or any of the national organizations. So when you pay attention to those 2-3, highlight, publicize, make a big deal, offer to other mosques, we are willing to come, although you're not our mosque. If you want, we will do a branded presentation for your mosque. They'll be more than happy to do it.
Yeah. Along the line of what he had said, the election season is a great season. And the delegate process, both for the Republican and the Democratic Party, is going to get really cranked up with the first primary in February. So starting this week, we already have messages going out to the masajids. And in Houston, there are a ton of them. And it doesn't have to be within the same organization, but separate organizations that we, our organization, Emerge 501c3, will come and will give a presentation which is bipartisan and will identify the opportunities for people to become delegates, to become precinct chairs, and to be involved and be engaged. If we really focus stuff to be done every 4 years, then there is a drop-off, as we've recently seen in both the 2010-2014 elections, that midterm elections, there's such a low voter turnout that you have, frankly, extremes of both party candidates get elected who really don't represent the community. So collaboration with masajid, but also identifying how to get the general public engaged and involved is a critical factor.
So I want to ask you a question, Alex, before I have a question for the audience. But I want to ask you to do a stock taking. You're an expert. You work on a lot of issues of representation, and you talked about Islamophobia. How would you rate, just be totally honest, the American Muslim community's responses to a lot of these themes and memes that are going around? So we've got Ben Carson right now, we've got Donald Trump. It seems like it's getting worse. What do you make of how Muslims have been responding to these kinds of arguments?
So it's interesting, having worked on a lot of different issues and with a lot of different communities, every community is the first to criticize itself about how bad its response is. And if I see any common theme, everybody thinks that their community is more dysfunctional than the next. And quite frankly, I did a lot of organizing in the LGBT community, which is actually how I originally had was asked to do this work. And I think we made a lot of mistakes in that movement early on from a communications perspective and had very high-profile losses, like Prop 8 in California. But we learned from those mistakes and did things differently the next time. I think it's interesting here. There's actually been a lot of success. You're talking about defeating bills, right? Like that. There haven't been that many mistakes in terms of an actual policy outcome that went the wrong way, right? And that garnered national attention. And I think there will be a moment when that happens. That will probably be a really key moment, I think, of reflection about, okay, we used this strategy this time and it did not work. What are we going to do last time? But fortunately, it sounds like there's been a lot of ally building, and it's been backbenchers who've been putting forward these sort of fringe bills that have thankfully not really passed. So I think that's actually, pat yourselves on the back for beating those things back. It'd be nice if they didn't exist at all in the first place, but it's almost impossible to stop the crazy fringe from putting forward crazy things.
Any questions from the audience? Otherwise, I'm going to ask you a question. Good. Hamza in the back.
Thank you, Haroon. And I want to say thank you to this panel. I've been waiting all day for this panel, actually. Everything you've said so far is rung true to my heart. I wanted to just touch base, kind of going off of what Bob Morrow said about the Adams community. I'm from his sister county, Montgomery County, the best place in America to live, with 4 out of 10. Are you from Montgomery County too? Where about?
Chevy Chase, Bethesda.
Potomac, so.
Okay.
Rivals but friends.
That's right.
Rivals but friends. Montgomery County is home to 4 of the 10 most diverse cities in the country, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, and is home also to 10% of our county out of 1 million people is Muslim, so 100,000 people total belong to the Islamic faith. And I want to bring that up because in the last couple of years, we've seen a huge outgrowth of Muslim political involvement in Montgomery County, and we've had 2 Muslims elected in Montgomery and Prince George's County in this past election for municipal elections last Tuesday. And on top of all that, the young Muslim community, young professionals community has been driving hard to involve the greater community into the political spectrum. And we're looking to have, in the next 4 years, as many as 5 to 6 candidates run for state delegate. And really what AJ was saying hit home to me as a fellow Emerge board member about engaging at the precinct level. My question back to you is, how do we take the Montgomery County model and the Adams model and export that across the country so that we have this strong model that we can use in order to empower Muslim Americans to really enter the political landscape and move beyond the civic discussions we're having here in a parlor setting and go really into driving into making America what it can really, truly be through our involvement. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to answer it. I just want to mention one thing for Montgomery County because I was pretty up close to that. A great example of being locally involved is the school board. So the Montgomery County School Board, I'll give you a little briefing on this. You may or may not have known. In Montgomery County Public Schools, they allow vacations for the Christian holidays. They allow vacations for the Jewish holidays. And when the Muslim community step forward and say, may we please have the holiday for at least an excused absence for the Islamic holidays. And the school board said no first. And then they went back and they reassessed it and they said, well, because they didn't want to say yes, they said we're going to take all religious holidays off the calendar and we're going to have winter breaks, certain winter breaks we're going to call them, that of course include the Christian and the Jewish holidays, but certainly not the Muslim holidays. It is a crazy decision. I give you and your colleagues kudos for continuing to push on this issue. And the way that you continue to push is that you work with the school board and you nominate new candidates for the school board and you knock people out of office that don't agree with you in the democratic kind of way until you get the change that you want. With respect to having a network across America, you know, that takes organization and it takes money, like we talked about today. There are many wonderful American Muslim organizations, and I know within every community there's always rivalries. But if you took the top 10 active American Muslim organizations across the United States and put a little red pin in where they're located, and you guys all came together, men and women, and decided to do a political 101 training, very much like this, and did a roadshow in all 50 states, I bet you can cover the whole United States within a couple of weeks.
There's a question there. Yeah.
2 questions, one for Alex and one for Randa. Alex, you mentioned that after these initial struggles of the LGBT community, you moved forward with the lessons learned. What were those lessons, and how did you move forward as a unified front? We find within the Muslim community that we are sometimes our own worst enemy. Randa, you mentioned that it's important to keep the our public appointed officials accountable. Yep. How do we do that, especially when we don't have as much political clout?
So to answer the question about the lessons learned from the LGBT movement, I think one critical thing I'd mentioned after the failure of the marriage bill or ballot initiative in California, prior to that, the message that had been in use in most states about why you should support marriage for LGBT people had been from a rights perspective. Everybody deserves the same rights that you get from marriage. Well, when people think about marriage, we asked them in research, why do you get married? Is it for the rights? And they're like, no, because I love and am committed to my partner, and this is a public expression of that commitment. So there was a huge disconnect of what we were saying about why gays and lesbians deserve to be married, right? Everybody actually agreed, yeah, you should have the rights. But the problem was they didn't think that gay relationships were real relationships. So the strategy after California was put forward stories of the couples themselves and lean into, this person doesn't want to get married for the rights, this person wants to get married because they are 85 years old and have been together for 55 years and they just want to be married like everybody else. That was the key learning that then got implemented in state after state, and we started winning. I think it goes back to where I was talking about how you tell the American Muslim story. That, to me, are critical elements of how to tell that story in order to beat back this Muslim as extremist stereotype and to try to put to rest these fears about Muslim does not equal American. So it's not like there's a sort of high-profile issue here, I think, that has kind of caused a sort of catalysion point that was so clear. After California, the whole community came together and was like, what are we going to do differently next time? I know this is kind of more of a recurring debate of things that have just persisted for decades now. So I think that actually makes it harder to have the shift to something new, because there isn't an event that forces you to go, oh, this did not work. What are we going to do differently? And I think that's just hard. You then, it becomes a debate that doesn't have a real world data point that forces you to shift.
From a broad perspective, the way you keep politicians accountable once they're in office is to be actively involved in their campaigns and when they're running for office and in their policy discussions. So let me give you an example from my personal experience. In 1999, when I was working in the US Senate, very much like we are today, there were a number of individuals running for the Republican nomination for president. And I was invited to go visit with one of them in Austin, Texas. His name was Governor George W. Bush. And so I boarded the plane in Washington and flew down with, I think there were 10 other Muslim Americans and Arab Americans with us. We met with Governor Bush in his office in the state capitol in Austin, and we had the opportunity to talk about Muslim and Arab American issues. Two issues that I talked about, because I happened to be working on them when I was in the United States Senate as a legal counsel to the senator, was secret evidence and profiling. And I talked to him about it broadly, but specifically how it affected our community. And then I talked to him a little bit about, hey, to be very honest with you, Al Gore, one of the candidates on the Democratic side, invented airport profiling. He invented it through a TSA program in the 90s at some point. So I provided him with all the documents. And then, Governor Bush decided that he wanted to reach out to the Arab American community and had a very robust outreach to the Arab and Muslim community, of which I was a part of during the campaign. I decided he was my candidate. I worked with him, particularly in Michigan and other places where, again, the community had an opportunity to meet with him at a private roundtable. 25 members of the Arab and Muslim community. Okay, this is in the year 2000. Okay, we know what happened. As they say, the rest is history. In the second debate during foreign policy, when he was debating Al Gore, what did he say? When Al Gore started to talk about stop and frisk and African Americans being profiled in New Jersey by police officers, George W. Bush came up with this, well, Arab Americans and Muslim Americans are profiled too. And out from the mouth came these issues that we had been talking to him about. Flash forward, he becomes president. I started working in the administration January of 2001 and was invited to several events at the White House, including gatherings by the Orthodox community, the Armenian community, the Hispanic community. They all had these big events at the White House where they would have lovely days and they would meet with the president. So I stood up and said, well, what about us? What about the Arab and Muslim community? We want a meeting with the president. It took a while of my convincing that our community was quite active in the Bush campaign, quite active in supporting the president, wanted to hold the administration accountable to our community's concerns, and finally, through a lot of pushing and prodding, I'm a very persistent person, if you can't already figure that out, we got a meeting. We got a meeting with the Arab and Muslim community on September 11th, 2001 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And as I woke up that morning and put on my nice clothing to go meet the President of the United States and drove my daughter to daycare and got to my office, the first tower was hit, and the second tower was hit. And my boss, the Secretary of Energy, came into my office and said, Randa, we're not going to the White House today. And I said, I know. Flash forward 3 weeks later, that meeting happened with the Arab and Muslim community, but it happened under very different circumstances and for a very different purpose. And the president reached out to our community and said, what is it that I could do? What is it that you can do to convince America that Islam is a religion of peace, that the people who did this were terrorists, that this was not an act of a religion? What are the types of things we can do? And he held his promise, and he was accountable because our community held him accountable. I just have to tell you one last personal story. I was with President Bush 2 weeks ago. There was a reunion for many of us who worked in his administration. And he took questions from the audience for about a half an hour. Do you know he talked about 9/11? He talked about Iraq. He talked about Afghanistan. He talked about domestic terrorism. And not once did he say the word Muslim. Not once did he say the word Islamic terrorist. He managed to talk about all those issues by using a word, and that was extremism. But he refused to tie the two together. So that's what I mean by holding people accountable.
Abdul Malik wanted to respond, and then Alejandro.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, main point which I get is that how interaction reflects and contributes. A senator sent a couple of staffers to my office, and just one simple message, that I receive letters from churches and synagogues and this office and that association. It is extremely rare for me to receive any letter from any mosques. So just a normal relationship. There was no election time or anything. Same thing, a award-winning journalist, whom I said, why did you join this newspaper? When she was fired, and she was telling me, Malik, when I write anything, I receive these several hundred letters when she writes in support of Muslim or any other cause, and not a single person or rarely one or two persons saying supportive. So considering not only the media people have blood and real people, but also politicians are real people. Absolutely. So connecting all of them with smiles, if not biryani and hummus, is always work.
Haroon, can I just make another very short comment?
Sure.
Talking about small wins, a couple of months back, the Imam of the Bohri community, I don't know if you know, many of you know who the Bohri community is, a small Shia sect, was visiting Texas. And he was going to have a sermon every single day for the first 10 days of Muharram. And the community went to the school district where this event was being held and asked that the children be given time off on a religious basis for these 10 days. And of course, the immediate answer was, sorry, can't do that. So they came to some of us who are engaged and they said, why don't you go and find out, is there any way we can do that? Because the Imam is like the Pope is for the Catholic Church. And when the Pope was here, yes, the children got time to go and at least, stand in the crowd and see him. So we went to and talked to them, and when you have relationships, solutions are found. They found there is a state of Texas regulation which says for a religious event, you can take 1 day off for the event and 1 day for travel, either way, so you can take 3 days off. And so these folks were asking for 10 days, so they said, okay, we're going to give you 5 days off. First 2 days for the second week, Thursday, Friday, and 3 days for the first week, because it starts. Now, I don't know of any place where children get 5 days off of school during the school session, but they found a way. We didn't come up with it. They found a way because the engagement and relationships that were built. That's where politics helps.
Okay. Alejandro, you have the last question.
Thank you very much, Haroon. And thanks to the panelists as well. My name is Alejandro Butel. I happen to be a researcher at the University of Maryland START Research Center. My question is somewhat academic, but it does interest me a little bit personally as well, given that I happen to be American Muslim. And I'd be curious to get to hear from both Alex and Randa. So some of the research that we're doing right now at our research center, which is dedicated to terrorism studies, is looking at responses to violence and extremism, particularly from the community. And one of the most interesting data points that my team and I have been uncovering is that so far since 9/11, there have been some 350, at minimum, that we found statements that have been done by Muslim American organizations and actors. That is a conservative count. I have to emphasize that. And yet, one of the things that sort of perplexes me is that there is this constant question, whether sincere or cynical, in the public that says, why aren't Muslims speaking out on terrorism and extremism? And so I guess I'm curious to know, if nothing else for my own research purposes, is why, in your sort of view, are we continuing to see this sort of phenomenon contrary to the overwhelming body of empirical evidence that my team and I at least have encountered thus far?
So I would say two things on that. So first, an audience has to hear a message 7 times before they will remember it, literally remember it. They have to hear it more than that for them to actually start to believe it. So repetition is key. So even, 300 sounds like a lot, but I also, I'm actually surprised it's that low. If you were to compare, I don't know if you've compared it to, statements that come out from other things. And I don't mean it wasn't said frequently, but the frequency with which somebody needs to hear a message in order to truly be persuaded by it, the volume is low. I get this from activists all the time. They're like, but we've been saying that message till we're blue in the face and I'm bored with it. And I'm like, for each person who's never heard it before, it is a new message. You have to keep being blue in the face and it's going to be really boring for you. The other problem is that the audience is constantly getting reprimed about the connection between Muslim equals terrorist. Every single time there's a story on TV that makes that equation, it is pushing back against whatever just got said. So it's also, what is the relationship between the two? How many statements versus how many times they've seen a news story that shows them something different? That's the challenge.
Okay, so remember about the one-page talking points I was encouraging you all to sit down and put together when you're talking in the media? Well, the opponents of your community have their own one-pager, and it goes something like this. Muslims never condemn. Allah is not your God or my God. Islam is a cult religion. And number 4, Sharia is going to take over the country. So that's their one-page talking points. And they're getting a lot of airtime. So let me do an interview with you on Fox News. Let me first ask you, why hasn't the Muslim American community denounced this latest act of terrorism? Let me then ask you your connection to CARE, and what, if any, your connection to CARE is. And then the third question I'm going to ask you is, why are you supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda? That is the nature of the interviews. That is the nature of the media. And it's called, did you beat your wife? Why did you beat your wife? It's that type of argument. We learn about that in law school. So your opponents have a great one-page talking points, and those are the talkers. And those are the talkers that are getting out, like Alex said, time and time again. Islam is a cult religion. Sharia is trying to take over. Muslims never denounce acts of terrorism, and they're all part of this, Islamic network. So that's their one-pager. You better get your one-pager together and start having proactive talking points and pushing back with facts.
Just really quickly on that, I could not agree more. The other key thing that I said, the same message 7 times, literally the same words on the exact same theme, right? So if people are even articulating the same idea but using same language, they're not going to remember it. So the importance of kind of coming together, crafting common talking points is critical to making sure that every time those 300 are heard, it's the exact same thing. It'll make that chorus just more effective if they're all singing the same note.
So I wanted to end on a human note. I've done a lot of the Fox interviews. If you're nice and calm and you don't sound like a crazy person, which is kind of how a lot of Muslims end up sounding, which is normal because you're being pushed. You're being kind of it's incitement. And if you're calm and you're cool with it, over time, one thing that's amazing is you actually get to know the people on Fox are human beings, and they're nice, and they start telling you stories and jokes and embarrassing anecdotes, and you develop something of a relationship. That's not necessarily sufficient to change the narrative, but it is possible to change the narrative. So I like the fact that you pointed that out, and everyone should have answers to those questions in their heads. Thank you very much for an amazing panel. Thank you all for the patience, the great questions, and if you have any other questions, hopefully you'll be able to track our panelists down. Again, there were some folks, I believe, from PBS and elsewhere who were happy to talk to you. Oh, we got someone waving, identifying. So if you're interested in talking more, first let us know what your opinions are, and then we'll let you know if we're going to. Look, we've had some bad experiences in the past. So, if you're approved by the MPAC Council, they'll let you talk to the media. I'm just kidding. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Nice to meet all of you.
Today, a look at the past 10 years in the